Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the July 4th. I think that should say 2023, but maybe we've gone back 10 years in time. Committee of the Whole. That's weird. We do. If we don't, whoops. Anyways, we are 2023. Welcome and welcome back, Deputy Mayor. Thank you. Acknowledgement.
Thank you, Mayor Donovan. We would like to acknowledge that we are meeting here today in Kispukwit, one of the 7 districts of Mi'kma'ki, homeland of the Mi'kmaq people. We acknowledge the treaties of peace and friendship, and we thank the Mi'kmaq people for their generosity in sharing their homeland with us. We are all treaty people.
Thank you. And Deputy Mayor, the motion to approve the agenda, please.
I would move that the agenda be approved as circulated and or amended.
I'm going to make a couple of amendments. We are going to remove the AT discussion to September. One of our senior staff is sick today and would like to be, needs to be part of that. We're also going to go in camera after public input. We have a counselor who we would like to be part of that, who has to leave. And for those who are watching on YouTube, the feed will be cut when we go in camera after public input, and then it will come back on when we come out of camera and continue with the agenda. So with those changes, could I have a seconder, please? Councillor Elliott. All those in favor of approving the agenda as amended, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. What's the matter?
It's the eyeball to eyeball.
Opposed? Okay. See nobody who is opposed. All right. The Committee of the Whole meeting of June 13th, 2023.
I would move that the minutes of June 13th, 2023 Committee of the Whole meeting be approved as circulated and or amended.
And seconder, please. Councillor Butler, are there any errors or omissions in that? I will note that I did share, there's one little typo that that will get fixed up, and we're a little confused. And I think the clerk is going to change. We know that Councillor McKay and Deputy Mayor left. We actually didn't do anything. So we're going to remove that. We then came back and we adjourned the meeting. So.
Carry on with us.
That's right.
Anyway, so that,
Precious
are there
minutes.
any other points? No. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That is
Okay.
passed. And Committee of the Whole in-camera meeting. June 15th.
I would move that the minutes of June 13th, 2023 Committee of the Whole in camera meeting be approved as circulated and or amended.
Thank you. A seconder, please. Thank you, Councillor Palmer. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Those are passed. Councillor Elliott, I don't know what you're laughing about. It's not to share. Oh, good. All right. And welcome to our presenters, Soren Bondrup Nielsen. You have a presentation about hemlock woolly adelgid. Thank you.
Thanks. Yes, I do. And thanks for inviting me to give this. Can you hear it at this distance? Is that okay? Yeah, thanks so much for inviting me to give this presentation. And I feel that I'm not here to convince anybody of anything. I'm really here just to present the information about the hemlock woolly adelgid and potential consequence for the town of Wolfville. So, yeah, so my name is Soren Bondrup Nielsen. I was at Acadia for 27 years. I only lived in Wolfville for 2 years, in 89 and 91, thereabouts. But I live, halfway between here and Canning. And I do think that I call Wolfville my town, in a sense, that I spent so many years here. And I'm currently the president of the Blomidon Naturalist Society, which I have been since 2017, 18 or so. I think it's probably time to step down, but I can't somehow, because it allows me to continue what I did in the biology department at Acadia, which was to teach conservation biology primarily and ecology. So I'm quite concerned about our human footprint on this globe and what we can do about it. Anyways, I have to click on something, I think, to make this. There, no, it disappeared. Share screen. Should I click or you're gonna click? Well, don't go to the video just yet, sorry. I just, yeah, to this. Yeah, oh, the mouse is moving without me. Anyways, yes, so hemlock woolly adelgid. I thought initially I might just talk to you about it. But in 2018, I hired a student to work for the Blomden Naturalist Society. And one of the jobs was to produce a documentary on hemlock woolly adelgid. It's only 9 minutes long, so it's relatively short, but I think it puts it all in perspective quite nicely. And just looking at the picture that's on the screen right now, that is the hemlock stand in the town of Wolfville that we will be discussing later. And I don't, it's on the Millennium sorry, Trail, just up by the little pond that's up there. And I'll show maps of it later on. But anyways, so let's get to the documentary. Perfect.
So we're standing here today in a beautiful hemlock stand. Some of these trees are probably up to 250 years old. So this ravine is a great place to walk for many people, but it's also necessary for a lot of wildlife that live here. So these eastern hemlocks are very important to this landscape. However, they are now under threat of a newly introduced invasive pest known as the hemlock woolly adelgid. So this pest feeds on hemlock trees, and it feeds on their nutrients, leading these trees to die and eventually whole stands to die. So in this short documentary, we aim to cover the importance of eastern hemlock in this habitat, as well as this newly introduced pest, the hemlock woolly adelgid, and finally what you can do to help either prevent or slow down the spread of this pest throughout Nova Scotia. Eastern hemlock is known as a foundational species, meaning that it has a disproportionate effect on the habitat surrounding it.
So one of the really fascinating things about hemlock is that it's one of the shade-tolerant species, which means that young trees can survive in the shade. Now, what they do, these young trees, is they basically just wait for an opening for a big tall tree around here to blow over or die. So a tree like this here, that size, it looks like it's young, but this could be 50 years old in fact. So here we have a slab of a hemlock that illustrates how old hemlock can get and also their growth patterns. So this hemlock started growing in 1667, and for 49 years it hardly grew at all, and it was probably shaded out by big trees around it. One of these trees probably died, and then light penetrated the forest and the hemlock could grow to 1992 when it was cut down. So hemlock stands are regenerated through what's called gap dynamics. That means that one or two trees may die, letting light down to the forest floor, and suddenly there's an explosion of growth of herbaceous vegetation and young trees taking over. And eventually one of these trees will dominate the gap, and in say 100 years or so we won't even notice that there was all this vegetation on the floor, because again the light will have been cut out. So one of the important effects of having a canopy cover over a stream like this one is that it blocks out the sun, and therefore the water stays relatively cool, which is good for a number of critters, fish, invertebrates. Not just hemlock provide that, of course, but any trees growing along the stream. Now, if we look at the slopes around here, then you'll see that they're fairly steep. However, it's the roots that maintain the soil, the stability of the soil. And if the trees weren't here and it rained, a lot of the soil would run off, get washed into the creek and out, causing all kinds of problems. Hemlock stands give us a sense of, in fact, who we are, that we're these short-lived, almost insignificant species compared to the hemlock. So we are dwarfed in both time and size when we're in hemlock stands. And all I can say is that they're awe-inspiring.
Well, the hemlock woolly adelgid is an invasive species. It's a significant pest of hemlock trees. And what it does is it feeds on these nutrient and water storage cells at the base of the hemlock needles, causes the needles to fall off, and eventually will lead to the tree dying. So hemlock woolly adelgid, or HWA, has a complex life cycle. It has 2 generations per year, and the insects are all female, so they don't need to find mates in order to reproduce. It has a capacity to get into very, very high populations in a very short period of time. So the most obvious sign that your tree isn't infested with the hemlock woolly adelgid are these white woolly egg sacs that you see on the underside of the branch. If we were to peel back some of this woolly egg sac, this is where the eggs are laid,
Right.
and the adult insect is present. Now, after the eggs hatch, they are in a mobile stage. It's called the crawler stage. And what they do is they walk out to the new growth, if there's new growth present on the tree.
Right.
And then if they find a good place to establish, they insert their mouth, this straw-like thing that inserts into the twig, and that's where they stay for the rest of their life. But this crawler stage it lasts for months, and this is the stage when the insect is most mobile. Now, this time of year, late summer, the crawlers are no longer active. And actually, what they do is they go to sleep, so they're estivating. They go to sleep for the late summer, and they'll start again feeding in the fall, late fall. And then as they feed, they'll start producing this white woolly egg sac around them. And remember, they don't have to find a mate in order to reproduce.
No, that's exactly
so. All they have to do is
Right.
start producing these eggs
Yes.
when they're ready, and that will happen in the late winter. HWA is native to Asia. It was introduced on the east coast of North America in the 1950s in the Virginia area, and it has since been spreading up the seacoast. In its native range, HWA is actually not a significant pest. It's believed to be kept in control with some host resilience, but there are also a number of predators that feed on it. And in eastern North America, we just don't have those predators present. How it arrived in Nova Scotia is not clear. However, we do know that the pest can be spread by people moving infested materials from an infested area to another. The pest will also spread naturally, and it can do this through the wind, but also through birds and other animals that could brush up against a tree that's infested. So last July, HWA was first discovered in Nova Scotia. We followed up with significant amount of survey work and determined that the pest had established itself in 5 counties in Nova Scotia. So it's present in Digby, in Annapolis, in Queens, in Yarmouth, and in Shelburne counties. These 5 counties are now currently regulated for the HWA. So we're concerned about people moving things like firewood or hemlock material that could be infested from an area where the population is to another area of the province or another part of Canada. In the United States, HWA has been present since the 1950s, and they've been managing HWA through 3 main methods. They've been using the introduction of biocontrols, they've been using applications of pesticides, and they've also been using some silviculture and management strategies in order to minimize the impacts of the pest. These methods need to be assessed to see how feasible they are in the Canadian context and see how feasible they would be with respect to our Nova Scotia population.
So what can you do when it comes to the hemlock woolly adelgid? Well, I think its presence here means that it's going to continue to be here. Eradicating it across a whole region like Nova Scotia is going to be impossible. But what we humans can do is slow down the spread And we can slow down the spread by ensuring that if you are in a hemlock stand that is infected, then make sure that you don't transport what are called the crawlers from one stand to another one.
Firewood is a pathway for spread for many invasive species, and it's always a good practice to purchase your firewood where you burn it and not move firewood long distances to prevent the spread of a number of different invasive species.
Additionally, an important aspect is to monitor the hemlock woolly adelgid. So if you have a stand where there is a trail that you frequent, then keep an eye out for presence of the hemlock woolly adelgid. And if you see that, then report that to the CFIA. So the aim is to slow down the spread of the hemlock woolly adelgid, because the slower it spreads, the more time there is to investigate means of potentially eradicating the hemlock woolly adelgid.
HWA has the potential to seriously impact hemlock forests in eastern Canada. Hemlock is an important species for the environment. It acts as a foundation species in many forests, and there are many other organisms, many other animals and plants and fish that depend on an environment that has hemlock. So this loss of hemlock because of the HWA has the potential to cause a significant amount of damage to the environment.
Professors they use sound to reduce their weight and gravitational effect.
I don't know where that's coming from, sorry. Face the what, sorry? Escape. Oh, there. Okay, oh yeah, I see. Do I do something? There, okay. Whoa, we can start with that one. And oh, I used to teach at Acadia, right? So I knew all about this stuff, but now I get confused. Insert, draw, percent. File. Okay, yeah, sorry about that. Anyways, I hope that little video was informative. Okay, there we are. Good. Oh,
If you click slideshow, then
yeah,
you'll be
where's
able to
slideshow?
easily-
I don't see it. Slideshow.
So it's just hidden under
Oh,
this. We managed to hide it. under
Oh,
here.
yes.
Let me drag this down.
Aha, yes, slideshow. There it is. That was what I was looking for.
We hit it on you.
From current slide. Yeah, perfect.
Right, and then to
And
advance it, just hit the little
Hit the,
arrow
yeah,
here.
and then
Yeah,
I'll move this stuff back up.
yeah, you can
Uh,
just slide
I
it
don't
up.
want to,
I can do it for you. You'll
Oh,
like
I
it.
see.
Perfect. And then
okay,
these are your buttons to
right,
advance.
excellent. Sorry. No, fancy. Okay, now it's working. Okay, so that presentation was in, or that documentary was in 2018, and it's now 2023. This spring or late winter, I guess there's snow on the ground if you look here. I went down to Bear River where Ron Neville, where we interviewed him. And every single hemlock stand down there is now a naked tree standing without any needles on it. So, and all of southern Nova Scotia, wherever their hemlock stands are dead. And it is, you know, you can say it's part of nature, that this is what happens. But I think we also need to understand that we humans are fundamentally responsible for it. So I often, when people say, well, we should let nature do its thing, then that argument translates that we should let humans just burn fossil fuels and not care about global warming, etc. But we are, you know, destroying our own habitat. So I think we are responsible for what's happening. And exactly. So now hemlock woolly adelgid is throughout Kings County and Lunenburg County. It is a little deceptive because when you see hemlock trees in the latter stage of being infected, a person, if you don't really think about it, you might say, well, that tree is alive. But if you look at it like this one here, when you look up through the crown, there's an awful lot of light coming through. So the needles are slowly coming off. And if you look at the branches, the growing tips should have very vibrant needles on it, but they have nothing. And in fact, they often swell up a little bit just before the tree totally dies. And when the tree is in these latter stages, then it's too late to do anything. So what I have been doing, I lead a lot of field trips, and one of my favorite fall trips is to go follow the Millennial Trail. I tend to talk a lot, so we only make it from the parking lot down here and about up to the pond, and that takes 2 hours. Where if you walked it normally without stopping, it might take 5 minutes. But anyway, there's a wonderful hemlock stand up around that little pond there. And it has all the qualities of hemlock that you anticipate to see. The documentary, I should say, was filmed in the Kentville Ravine that now has hemlock woolly adelgid in it. And there seems to be a very slow response by the federal government to do anything. And they had that horrendous slump of garbage last year. Anyways, so this is a Google Earth image, and it just turns out that hemlock stands out as a light green compared to the darker green around it. So I have been going there for the last 3 or 4 years. And what I look for in the spring is, in the spring, many of the branches, because of ice and snow, etc., will break off. So it's very easy to survey for the adelgid, because you can just look at all the hemlock branches on the forest floor and pick them up. And that's what I did, and that's what I've been doing. And this spring, unfortunately, I came across a number of branches in one particular area that had these little white egg sacs on them. And that alerted me to the presence of hemlock woolly adelgid in that particular stand. So what can be done about it? Well, there are pesticides that have and are being used in Ketchi, for example. I'm sure you've all been to Ketchi National Park, which is, the feature species down there is basically the lakes and the hemlocks. And they are heavily infested. So they have started using some pesticides to try to get to save a few areas. They can't save the whole park, of course. But pesticides, of course, are highly controversial. There are 2 treatments that presently can be used, and one of them is Cytec 2F, which is a bark spray. It is you spray it onto the bark on the lower trunk, and the pesticide moves into the bark and then slowly up throughout the whole tree. And this particular pesticide has just been okayed for use in Canada. It is relatively cheap in that it costs 18 cents per centimeter of what's called diameter at breast height of tree. So a 40 centimeter tree would cost $7.20 to protect. But there's a limit to the amount of product that can be used in a year, and also a limit to how close you can do it to water. And that limit is 1.89 liters per hectare per year. Imajet is the pesticides that's physically injected into the tree, which is a lot safer, but it's also a fair bit more expensive at $1 per centimeter. So a 40 centimeter tree, why did I say 30 up there and 40 down here? Anyway, that would be $40. Never mind, should have been the same. But you can inject trees that are only 15 centimeters. Now, as you heard in the documentary, the Canadian Forestry Service are looking at a predator of the hemlock woolly adelgid. It's a little beetle, Leucopius nigrinus, which is the most, seems to be the best one. It's found out west in BC, where it is a native species, and it keeps hemlock woolly adelgid in control out there. Canadian Forestry Service is looking at rearing it and releasing it here, but they're first looking at all the consequences, which are going to be very difficult to do, of course, because you never know, many consequences come many years later. But that is what they are working on. So the people that are concerned about hemlocks who are spraying or injecting the trees are hoping that in 5 years or so, when the spray doesn't work anymore, you only have to do it once, that this native predator will be established and can then begin to control the hemlock woolly adelgid. So I think the options that I often talk about to people is that you can do nothing and the hemlocks will die. And that might be okay in certain areas, but I think after this spring of all the fires that we had in the province, the largest fire in recorded history in Nova Scotia, and not just human history, but in terms of doing what are called fire studies, where you can look at old trees to see when fires occurred down in the Shelburne area. And unfortunately, because of the location of this particular hemlock stand in Wolfville, if all the trees there die and then they catch on fire, that's not going to be very good. Now, one can treat all the trees with pesticides and then hope that in 5 years there is going to be a natural predator. But I can imagine that in Wolfville, like in any place, there are always people that are concerned about pesticides, and we certainly should be concerned about pesticides. But we should also be concerned about the safety of, you know, having dead trees that are going to potentially catch on fire, or, you know, trees will fall down and could potentially injure people or whatnot. So I think a third option is to go in there and remove some of the hemlocks, treat the remaining hemlocks, and then plant white pine and say red spruce, which are already growing up there in certain places. So that would be kind of the balanced approach, I think. But it's a conundrum, because it's one of these things, I think, that especially because of the location of the stand, like you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't, unfortunately. So here are, I used Google Earth to just look at the stand. So this is the stand here. There's a little patch here, and the big patch is right here. And I calculated the size of the pond. So there are probably, this total area is only about half a hectare. So it's not that big. Half a hectare is 1¼ acres in size. So there are probably, and I haven't estimated the number of trees or anything. This is just kind of a guess based on the size of tree, general size of trees, but there's probably 200 to 300 trees up there. I did a few calculations. I don't think I actually have this as a slide. But at the current cost of, say, using the basal spray, which you could spray maybe 30 or 40 trees, and the injection, which could cover all the rest, there's no limitation on the injection. With the current cost and not factoring in the person who's going to be doing this, or the people, is about $10,000 I've estimated, but I could be off. Now, so I think, yeah, there's a decision to make, and in 5-6 years, I think that stand it's going to be too late to do anything. Though things can happen, of course. If we happen to have a full week of -25 this winter, that'll kill all the hemlock woolly adelgid. But the chance of a full week of -25 like in consecutive days is probably not good. It was quite cold this winter for 2 days, -20, but that was not enough. So yeah, so thanks for your attention, and I know a fair bit, but I don't know everything. So if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
Are there any questions from council? Councilor Ingham.
Thanks for that presentation, Soren.
Oh,
Very interesting. My question is like, does the HWA, does that just go on the needles? Like it doesn't go on the bark so much? So if I was walking and I saw some needles on the ground, would I notice it right away? Does it be something I noticed? And then if I did notice it, should I be afraid that it's going to attach itself to something else, or is it only associated with hemlock?
It's only associated with hemlock. And the crawler stage, which is the stage where that disperses, they crawl all over the place. So they're found on the bark of the trees. And this is why, like, one shouldn't transport firewood if it's hemlock. But if it's a tree that was cut in a hemlock stand, then the crawlers, they go everywhere. So they'll crawl up other trees as well, and then not find food and die. So if one is in an infested hemlock stand, the chance that you get some of them on your body, especially if you touch the bark or brush by, branches or small trees, they're probably going to be on you. And they're microscopic. You can't, like, they're like tiny little black flecks. So you saw Ron use one of these, what do they call it, like dust, like roller with sticky thing. And every time he's in a stand, he uses that on his whole body, just to make sure he doesn't, especially him, of course, because he's going around to all the hemlock stands to look for them. So he could be a primary transport of hemlock. So he's very careful. But yes, one should be very careful.
Okay, and is it safe to say that the birds and the wind transport it more than humans would, or?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay,
I think, like during migration, birds are like songbirds are flying up south, right? And they'll land in trees to feed, and then they fly on. And I think that there's a great chance that it was birds migrating that brought hemlock woolly adelgid to Nova Scotia, because it did arrive in Yarmouth County. By the time it was detected, it was in all those 4 southern counties. So it takes a while to see that they're actually here. And once you see the pest, like I found, I think it's fairly well established, unfortunately.
just one last question, sorry. So because they came from Southeast Asia and that's a warmer climate, are they more prevalent now because our climate's getting a little bit warmer?
Absolutely.
And you mentioned the -25, which we haven't had, that many days. So it's going to be more prevalent the warmer the temperatures are staying. Okay, thank you.
And there's all kinds of organisms that we are going to call pests that are going to arrive because of climate change. So the increase in temperature is totally changing everything.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Palmer.
I think it's very informative. How long ago was it identified in Keji? Like, how long did it take to kill the stands?
Well, it was detected in Nova Scotia in 2017.
Only.
Yeah, only. But it was already throughout those 4 southwestern counties in Nova Scotia. So it had been here for quite a long time. And it's very, like, unless you go out and really look for it, you're not going to detect it. Because there are other, like spiders, certain spiders will make those very similar little white puff balls on needles. So in order to identify, you really need somebody who knows what they're looking for and using a microscope. But when I found these this spring, I contacted Ron Neville, and he was not surprised because hemlock woolly adelgid is already throughout Kings County.
And if we cut trees down, the trees are useless. Then, like, we couldn't use them as firewood or anything. You'd want to, or I would guess that you'd want to contain.
Well, I don't know if CFIA may have regulations about that, but I think the since it's throughout Kings County already, if the trees were cut down, some of the trees, not all of them, I think they could be used for firewood, maybe even lumber. I'm sure that there are lots of people having hemlock stands cut now before the trees die for lumber.
Absolutely, because it's really great. It
'Cause
has an
it's a
advantage, it's a great
wonderful-
product.
Makes wonderful lumber.
And what time of year would you treat them?
They can be treated at any time. It can take up to almost a year before the pesticide that's injected or sprayed is throughout the tree. So it's, they can be treated at any time.
So you think we could treat them essentially today, we would save them for at least 5 years, that's what you're guessing.
That's, yes. Yeah, approximately.
Thank you.
Councillor Elliott?
Thank you. And thank you, Soren, for bringing your massive expertise to this room. I was reminded by your talk of a couch that we bought from IKEA. And after having it for several years, the leg on one corner of the couch started disintegrating and this bug crawled out. I have no idea where it came from, but it spooked us. So,
Yes,
so things do move around, no question.
absolutely.
My question for you is, I don't know if it was a year ago, there was a big drive to collect volunteer amounts of money to inject, I think, all the hemlocks on an island
Yes.
in the southern part of the province. And I just wondered what the response in terms of the trees was and whether it was deemed successful or not successful.
Well, that was done in 2021, I believe. And that was an island in Sporting Lake, down southern part of the province. They did inject all the trees. I don't know about any follow-up. But they're certainly hopeful that they were protected. It was, and I forget the size of the island. I could find out and let you know, but it's really like you inject the tree. It's not as if there's suddenly all the critters are going to die immediately. It's over time, and you have to, because the hemlock woolly adelie is going to continue to arrive on the island, but then not be able to make it. But they were successful in raising funds. They had many people out there injecting trees and so it's a matter of time to see if it was successful. And the same in Ketchi.
There was also someone connected with the Irving Center who was raising funds for the
Yes.
ravine in Kentville.
Yeah, that's at my age, I forget names all the time, but it was a student. No, it doesn't matter. Yeah, she raised funds for Kentville, and the Blomina Naturalists were sitting on the funds because it was a GoFundMe campaign, and in very short order she raised over $6,000 and had to take the money out, but there was nowhere to put it. So we are sitting on the $6,000, hoping that eventually something will happen in the Kentville ravine, but right now it's so slow that by the time they say yes, it might be too late. And at the time, the cost of this was primarily injection, a combination of injection and spraying. It was going to cost $70,000 to treat the Kentville ravine, like the whole ravine, which is it's expensive, absolutely. But it is a one-time cost, and I think if we don't get a predator, we can't continually inject trees with this pesticide, because there are, of course, other effects on it. Other insects that are feeding on hemlocks are also going to die. And the controversy, of course, is then, well, what happens to the birds that are feeding on these insects? So, because these two products are neonicotinoids, which are the ones that are deadly to aerial insectivores like swallows and such. But at least in the hemlocks, since it's not sprayed, it's only the insects that actually live on the hemlocks and they don't fly all over the place. So there's only danger to the birds that are actually hopping around feeding on insects on the trees. And I think it's a balance, like what's more important. Like to continually inject them is not feasible, but hopefully getting a natural predator in the future is what will work. And then, it's just been a kind of a stopgap measure.
CAO?
Yeah, and you basically just answered my question, which was after 5 years, what would our options be if we didn't have that predatory species? Can you re-inject, which you
Oh,
basically
yes,
said,
you can certainly re-inject.
but just not
absolutely.
continually?
But, well, I don't think it's feasible to continually inject because of well, I mean, that's a monetary decision that needs to be made, and you need a lot of support, I think, from the local community.
Thank you so much.
Oh.
I'm wondering if, Aaron, you can redirect me if my comment is, I guess I'm going to ask council. I'm thinking that we want staff to bring something back to us in terms of what is feasible. Is that right? So if it looks like we're all nodding our heads. So if we can do that, I do know that I have been concerned about, there's a lot of deadwood in that particular spot, and I was actually worried about it because of the fires. There's also, I'm wondering if maybe staff could reach out to the nursing home, or to the nursery school, because the children from the nursery school are always, and they've actually built some structures up
Exactly,
there.
I've seen that.
And they play up there, and who knows if they're taking wood back up to Huron or something, but just to let them know would be appropriate, I think. So I will leave that with staff. Thank you so much. Really, really appreciate you
I
bringing
do have one
this
point if
to
I
us.
may.
Yes, please do.
And that is like a big cost is to hire people to actually do the spraying and injecting, because you need to be licensed to do it and have hazmat suit and all that kind of stuff on. But I just wonder, in the town of Wolfville, you may already have people that have a license to use pesticides. So I think the cost of application could be a lot cheaper than it would be for, say, a private person with a hemlock stand who would have to hire somebody to do it. And like I said, I haven't gone up there and really estimated the total number of trees, but this fall I could certainly go up and do like a survey of just hemlocks and let you know how many there are and the sizes and such.
I'm sure staff, Kelton and Alex, perhaps, the two who would further connect with you
Right.
and bring back information to council.
Good.
Thank you so much.
Good. You're welcome.
We don't have anybody in the audience for public input. Do we have anybody online? If not, then I'm going to ask for a motion to go in camera, please. Thank you, Deputy Mayor and Councillor Butler. Second, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. We're now in camera, so we'll
I'm gonna
ask you
need-
to